he would have the music, but he wouldn't give it to the musicians until about 5 minutes before they were supposed to play. And so Thelonious Monk was notorious for spontaneity. He wanted to know about the spontaneity. So I have, as you can see, I've got his artist statement, I've got all kinds. So we might not follow any of this, okay? So just be ready. And he and I have talked. We would really like the conjecture, the injecture from you all as it relates to what we're saying. Because a lot of times with these kind of things, you have these questions and you have to wait. You have to wait. And sometimes you forget what you're going to ask. So if you've got something to inject into it, we'd like to hear that. First of all, I'm going to start out by asking, has anybody read David Foster Wallace?
I'm in the process.
Just hearing.
Okay. So I'm gonna.
Did you notice the evil eye she gave you?
I
read one story. I read a story from a collection I think called Hideous Interviews with Hideous Men or something like that, and it was in this piece anthology called New World Writing, and it had like Borges and Popa, the great Polish poet, and it was called "The Devil is a Busy Man." And I started thinking and realizing that was a take also on an old blues song. There's a blues song that Howlin' Wolf and Sunnyland Slim record called "The Devil." It's a standard. The devil is a busy man, and it talks about the covert, overt dealings of the devil. So I want to read some quotes by David Foster Wallace, because some of this is really interesting things, and some of the things I agree with vehemently, and some of the things I don't. He's talking about fiction, and then I'm gonna have Ward talk about David Foster Wallace. Okay, just a little bit. He says one of his quotations is, "I think that fiction that isn't really exploring what it means to be human today is an art." Another quote: The problem is that once the rules of art are debunked, and once the unpleasant realities, the irony diagnoses are revealed and diagnosed, then what do we do? It's really the question of Western civilization. What television is extremely good at, and realize that this is all that it does, is discerning what large numbers of people think they want, and by supplying it. And then the last one that I'm going to read is, for these cultures, getting rid of the pain without addressing the deeper cause would be like shutting off the fire alarm while the fire's still going. I want you to talk about your connectedness with Mr. Wallace and what drew you to him and to the work. Because you have to know about his background. His biography is very replete with these kind of disparate things. He's a very brilliant man, but he was also a very, very tormented man. So what drew you to David Foster Wallace?
Well, like you, the first book that I picked up was Brief Interviews with Hideous Men.
Right.
And it's a group of short stories that are, the interviews with hideous men are actually spread throughout the book. And they're hideous men. It's mostly men who are incarcerated or they're in mental institutions. And it's their opinion of women and sex. I mean, they're pretty awful stories, but the way that they're written, it's really intriguing. The entire book is not that. There's other short stories in between them. And the first one that I read, I just opened the book and started reading, and I was telling you, was The Depressed Person. And the way that it was written was so fascinating, and I didn't have any idea that I'd be making anything that had to do with David Foster Wallace. But the story is written in such a way that you follow the mind of this person who's depressed. And it's not leading anywhere. It starts off, she's depressed, and it ends, she's depressed. But along the way, you get to know about her psychiatrist and her parents and her problems and her medicine and all of the things that she's dealing with. But it's told from third person. It's not a person talking. Somebody else is telling you all of this. And I just thought it was fascinating. It was like a Kafka story, like The Trial or The Castle or The Burrow, where you never reach, like, where are you going? but it's not, you're not going anywhere. This is life. And when I read that, I thought, this man is fascinating that he could, well, one of the things about David Foster Wallace, he's encyclopedic. He loves lists, and he'll give you sometimes a page of drugs or a page of things that you'll have to look, not you, but I have to look up a lot of what's he talking about. But he also has a wonderful sense of humor. So about the time you're thinking, I don't know if I can stand this anymore, he'll throw something in a footnote or whatever, and you're just right back to, oh yes, that is fascinating. And so after reading that group of short stories, I thought, well, I want to read more. Now I had bought his masterpiece, his Infinite Jest. It's a novel about 1,200 pages long, 200 pages of footnotes. It's difficult, and if you watch interviews, in fact, you can watch on YouTube an interview he did with David Rose. He will tell you that he thinks, it should not be easy. He's not there to entertain you. He is there to inform you through this fiction, and it is rather tough. I would advise if you pick that one up, you maybe do it on your iPad, because after all, that book it's awfully heavy. So. But anyway, I had the book. I already had Infinite Jest. We just picked it up. It was sitting on a bookshelf for years, and I had read it. And I picked up Brief Interviews with Hideous Men because I thought the title was intriguing.
Yeah, it's a beautiful title.
Well, I told my friend came over and he said, "Well, you have Infinite Jest. You're going to read that?" And I said, "It's a pretty long book. I may get to it." And I said, "I think it would have to be interesting if this is." And he said, "Well, can I borrow it?" So I gave him the book, and he never brought it back. He still hasn't read it.
Oh.
But meanwhile, I got a supposedly fun thing I'll never do again, which is a group of essays he wrote. And the essays range from, they were written for Harper's and other magazines, but he, for example, he went to Las Vegas to see the Oscars that are given to pornography stars. And wrote a wonderful essay. It's hilarious.
Okay.
Then he wrote the next essay next to that is on usage. Somebody had come out with a new book on English usage and grammar. So he was reviewing that book. Well, he ends up tearing the book apart, and anyone that could even read it, I would say is a genius, much less he probably could.
Well, I mean,
but he did such a good job of that. This whole time I think this guy, he's a genius.
he was a genius. He was infinitely smart. I mean, he had, and part of the connectedness I think that you have, I might be wrong, is this whole connectedness between science and literature. He was a very brilliant man. I mean, make no mistake about it. I mean, I think he was of privilege, but he was a very brilliant man. But he was tormented. So were you drawn to the torment in the work? Because the torment's everywhere, it seems to be.
No, I was drawn to the absurdity in the work.
Absurdity.
Yeah. We've talked about the absurd. I mean, I'm much drawn to absurdity. Period.
Okay.
If I have a philosophy in life, it's absurdity at the base. But and it's everywhere in his work. Infinite jest abounds in it. But it's the kind of absurdity that's poignant. Actually, is leading somewhere. You come away. Well, I came away thinking about something that's different. So Infinite Jest is the great work he does. But it's in everything he does, even the essays. And so the next work I read was a group of short stories called Oblivion. And this is going to be a little crude, but I do want to talk about this because it was the one that made me want to do something. Then I read Infinite Jest. But in Oblivion, there's a story called The Suffering Channel. This was written in in the 90s, and he predicted what was going to be happening with reality television and celebrity. And he predicted Donald Trump, if you will. In fact, in Infinite Jest is set in the future, and the President of the United States is a former rock star who calls himself Johnny Gentle, who's the Beatle that didn't stay with the Beatles. But I mean, it's funny, and yet Johnny Gentle, he's obsessed with cleanliness, and so he is. This is in the future when Mexico and the United States and Canada become one big country, and so he's dumping all of our toxic waste into Canada, catapulting it into there, and they call it the Great Concavity. I have a box that's called Life in the Great Concavity, where people are being dum-dums, so to speak. And the people in Quebec, they're out to get their country back, and so they test all the young boys and see who's brave enough to be in their army, and so the little boys have to jump in front of a train, and the ones that live get to be.
And they're going to be those are the wheelchair.
Those are the wheelchair assassins. A lot of them
Yes.
lose their legs.
Right.
And
Yes.
so you have this story that's part of this.
Soon to be made a movie into a major motion picture with
Sorry.
Jennifer Lawrence.
Really?
Starring in the wheelchair. No, I'm kidding you.
That's what we were hanging on.
I was too. When does it come out?
When it's open.
From what we've seen of Jennifer Lawrence, I wouldn't be surprised.
But you know, one of the things I find really interesting is this. You know, you've got a piece called Lynch, and so on that, in particular, what we were talking about, voice box with metapsychosis. You know, and the reality. William Gibson had a novel out, cyber fiction, in which television had moved to this connected device where you would hook it up into your arm and you would feel the sitcom, you would feel the novella. He called it the feelies, which for me is backing up to Huxley. And Huxley, remember in Brave New World, he'll give you Soma, you go to the movies, you get Soma. So I find the connectiveness with all this work very intriguing. But let's talk about your process on how you cull the materials that you use for these books.
Well, I mean, I have a lot of stuff.
It's obvious.
Of stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it just sits on the shelf, and then when I'm doing something, it presents itself at the right time.
Okay.
I mean, the way I work, a lot of the way I work, I have a title before I have to work.
Good job. All right. Thank you. Thank you.
You have a-
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm a
Yes.
writer. I have to have a title.
I thought you said a Tylenol.
No. That too. So,
I usually start with a title.
okay.
And once I have the title, then I start looking on my shelves and it's like, oh yeah, there it was waiting.
Do you change the title in the process of working on the
Well, I
box?
have, but normally not.
Oh, you stick with the title. Hemingway was different. Hemingway would write the stories and then come up with the titles.
But sometimes, the title will be there. Like this was isomorphism, so this was going to be isomorph. What I did,
Whatever you did.
and I like that idea. I like
Okay.
things that are isomorphic being, they make it bigger. They don't basically
They
change the
change
shape.
it, right.
So
Where do you find your stuff? Are you constantly gathering stuff?
Oh yeah. In fact, the fun part, I'll sit it there and I always think, I wonder if I'll live long enough to use this, and where will it end up? And
But
when
I'm
it
really
does,
meaning, where do you find it? I mean, did you inherit all of this stuff, or do you go constantly looking?
no, I go constantly.
And where in small town?
Play markets, just
Junk shops.
it's what you do.
Yeah.
So one
And
of
it
the,
isn't always junk shops. I mean,
No.
sometimes I'll be going through Walmart and I'll be saying, oh, I think I could use that.
right.
Not very often, but I'm always on the outlook.
Yeah.
Unlike a painter, a painter can mix any color if they have the basic paints, but if you do this kind of thing, you're limited to what you have to work with.
Yeah.
And so I think you can never have enough stuff. And it depends on what you're doing. Now, but like 6 or 8 years ago, I was doing large altar type, and I built those, which I didn't use boxes or anything. But lately, the last 3 shows have been boxes. And I built a few of them, but most of them, it's like, well, why would I? I'm finding these wonderful boxes, and I just have to rebuild the inside.
I don't think there's anything built in this show.
Well, all of the insides are built.
Maybe-
They start off as empty boxes.
Maybe the little guy
No.
over here.
No, I
No?
think you're right. I think most of these are found.
Yeah, these are all found.
So with most of the boxes, there's this kind of voyeuristic kind of quality. It's like looking into a storefront, right? But with yours, you've got a lid on it. So there's almost this esoteric kind of secretive thing. Is that done for a reason?
Yeah, that idea of anticipation. It's part of the art.
So you're injecting the drama into it from the beginning.
yes.
There's a reveal.
I used to have this little image of a crystal object, and it said it, what is it? I don't know what it is, but I like it. That's what it said. And I always just loved it. I thought, well, it wouldn't matter what it was. It just was. It was just, and it was the anticipation of what it might be. And so I think, well, boxes are similar that way. You don't know what you're going to see. Once you see it, you can be disappointed.
Right.
But you can always close it.
Right. So with your boxes are difficult. I'll just be honest with you. Your boxes are difficult to find a pathway into what they're trying to elicit. What if you were to give the viewer, this generic idea on how to I don't know, to assault, to get into your boxes, what would you tell them?
Well, that varies. Three shows ago, I did a box called Cautionary Tales, and each box actually had a cautionary tale that went with it. And so I think that made those pretty accessible.
Okay.
I mean, there weren't really descriptions, but when you put them together, that seemed to work. And
Made sense.
in general, I've been obsessed with this idea of deep time and the absurdity of our life in deep time. John McPhee, if you've ever read Annals of the Former World, was a great influence on my thinking.
Okay.
And I found myself getting more and more serious about that idea, that just such nothings in terms of deep time.
Deep time meaning billions.
Yeah, exactly.
So insignificance then.
But I mean, I found myself getting a little too serious, and I think Wallace brought me back. He let me put some of the humor back in. For example, you mentioned the voice box from Madame Psychosis. In Infinite Jest, one of the characters in Infinite Jest is, her name is Joelle Van Dyne, and they call her the Peacoat. She's supposed to be like the prettiest woman anyone could ever see. But her mother was jealous of her because the father gave her a lot of attention. So the mother goes to throw acid in the father's face, and he moves, and it hits the girl. So all throughout the novel, she wears the veil so no one can see her. So it's sort of that same idea of mystery. What was she really, ugly now, or does she still ever? You never know that. You never know. That's why it's a question in the book. But she tries to do things. Tries to find a life for herself, something that gives her a great joy that doesn't involve her beauty. Well, I did 2 boxes actually that involve that idea. One of them is the little box with Letta the Swan. I'll talk about it in a minute. But the other, she developed this persona of Madame Psychosis, and she did a radio program. And it was always late at night she would do this program, like 2 or 3 in the morning. So it was just a few people that would want to hear her. But instead of doing it like a story or a narrative or something like that, she would just read lists. And again, this is Wallace's fascination with lists. Well, one of our programs had her reading a list of human deformities and diseases and flaws. And so she would just sit there and read things like bird-headed dwarfism, cleft palate, athlete's foot, on and on and on. And then, it was like 2 or 3 pages, which you would think would get boring, but Wallace manages to put something back in there or give you a footnote that would crack you up. So I would keep reading. But he described her as in her radio program as if her voice were coming from a small box. So I knew I had to do a voice box for her. So what I did, I used the micro slides and I put people's faces on them so that they are like specimens of flawed individuals, and any of us can be on that, of course.
She was
They
Madame.
just happen to be those.
Right. She was Madame Sostre when I read it. She was Eliot's clairvoyant when I read it, because I saw her as someone who is delivering these fortunes to people who don't want to hear what she wants to say. And so, and there's a reference in a lot of the titles to literature. You've got a take on a Kundera title, which is invariable recognition of insignificance.
And you know what? His new book is what's oddly enough, and I'd already done that piece.
Had
I
you?
even knew about it.
Really?
And his new book is titled
I don't know what his new book is.
Oh, yeah, it's a festival of insignificance. Just
Oh,
came
really?
out in June.
Oh, okay. And then, this whole thing with this little museum of emerging, talk about that, because that's a beautiful title, the Little Museum for Emerging Marrow.
Well, a lot of postmodern literature, especially David Foster Wallace, will employ stories within stories. So you have like this meta text above and beyond what you're reading here. And so I just like that idea that at the heart of something, there could be something else that was unexpected, or it's explained in such a way, or it's wrapped in something whereby you wouldn't have seen it unless you delved into it. And so I thought, well, and again, it's just because I found those little pipe stems that were intricately carved, and these are so beautiful. So I thought, well, if I put cow bones, which are not so beautiful, well, they are, but in a different way, around them, then that kind of thing that emerges from them, I thought was sort of like what Wallace could have done in the story, or did do in some stories.
Right.
If Wallace were sitting here, he'd probably hit me, but to me, that's what he did in some stories.
So are titles so important to the work? You talked about having the titles.
They are, they really are.
So they're like the engine that generates the piece.
They are, and one of the most fascinating parts of Infinite Jest for me was a footnote. I was telling someone about reading Infinite Jest, and the man told me, he said, I just skipped the footnotes. And I couldn't believe he said that. You can't skip the footnotes in this book. The heart of much of the different stories are in the footnotes. But one of the footnotes, one of the main characters in the book is a man who he makes films. But we get a list of his films in the footnotes, and there's about 30 or 40 of them. And a description of how long each film was, whether it was black and white or color, who starred in it, blah, 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 blah. But the film titles and the synopses, they're so absurd. For example, I have a box here that's called, and I just use what he had, The Prenuptials of Heaven and Hell. And what a funny title. But when you read the synopsis of it, well, the synopsis said, God and Satan used tarot cards to play for the soul of a lunch bag salesman who's obsessed with Bernini's ecstasy of centuries. So you're just sitting here, you're like, more and more and more absurd. And you're realizing, well, this man, he makes films that can't actually be made. So what's interesting about them is they can only exist as literature in words.
Right.
And so I decided, well, I'll take that title, and I used it, Prenuptials of Heaven and Hell, because I already had that image of this couple that looked like a wedding photograph. On the outside, I left it the way that somebody made it, but on the inside, I have that couple disintegrating. And then you have opposites on each side of it, as if heaven and hell. There's black, there's white, there's the world, and then there's the reflection of the world. So, I thought, I'd like to do some other films. And so about 4 or 5 of these boxes are my idea of, his name is James Incandenza in the book, so they were Incandenza films. They're like stills.
That's so funny you say, because they look like frames to me. They look like frames, and
Well, one of them literally had some little film canisters that I found.
So then the question begs to be asked, what goes on before that clip, and then what goes on after that particular clip within the frame. Language is really interesting, but when I'm looking at your statement, and I've got notes, so you can look at my notes on this statement. Some of the stuff, I want to read a little bit about this, and then I want you to talk about the howling phantoids that you were talking about, which is a type of this particular show. But in the statement reads on this, it says, howling phantoids is an attempt to pay tribute to this rare genius and inspiration. Wallace says that we have our little sophistic delusions about utter singularity, that only we hear the whiny pathos of a dog yawn, the timeless sigh in the opening of a hermetically sealed jar, the splattered laugh of the frying egg, and the feeling of panic at sunset. If such is true, then our sophicism truly does bind us together. It's the way we read Wallace without going mad. It is also an inroad to an expansion of his compelling narrative, fantastic imagery. So, do you buy the pessimism and nihilism within the world?
Actually, I don't find that nihilistic at all.
Okay.
Quite the opposite. I find that's affirming that you can find what you want in what he writes or what I make or what anyone presents to you. Hopefully, what you bring to it will make it a more intelligent thing. But that's like Sartre and Camus. Do you want to be nihilistic and go this way, or do you want to admit there is no purpose and then make up one? And I love Camus' idea of creativity. I mean, it can be whatever. And what Wallace did, he gave a talk at one of the colleges at graduation, and he titled it "This Is Water." And the point of the talk was to tell the students that everything is perspective. If you're sitting in the traffic and you're sweating and it's just god awful, but you choose to be miserable. You could concentrate on the fact that maybe the person in front of you has cancer and blah, 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 blah. He goes on and on. But I mean, I think he's right. You choose the life you're in, and some of it is circumstance, I know that, but whatever it is, only you can make the best of it.
Because I mean, the rest of the stuff deals with, for me, language and how language plays into, and talk about the howling factoids and this whole thing with Wallace and his mother and creating these words, these kind of portmanteaus, and that's very fascinating because it's at the beginning of a new century, and Hemingway at the beginning of last century changed language, the way he used it in syntax. So talk about maybe how Wallace, for you, and his use of language,
well, Wallace's mother was a real stickler for usage at any time in their family that one of them used a term incorrectly or word incorrectly. And she said that any time that he said that his mother told him, it just gave her the howling phantoms.
Yeah.
Someone did that. And that's just such funny.
It is.
Anyway, if you tell someone you have the howling phantoms, it's something. Well, you could be one of those specimens over there, I would think. But I just thought, well, it's an uplifting.
It's a beautiful title. Yeah.
And he, in D.T. Max, wrote an interaction between the two of you.
Okay.
That's fascinating. Speak to it.
For me, it's for me the turmoil for me is that I don't see, I see some of the light, but I see the light through the suffering. And I don't think that anyone can really grow philosophically, and particularly as we're talking about this particular piece right here, I suppose, that you can grow without experiencing some kind of pain, some kind of setback, some kind of suffering. And so I understand about dystopias and stuff like that, but I don't embrace on the pessimistic level so much. I think that we as human beings have to get through that. He's piped in on some of that. We have to get through that. And you can't see it as pessimistic, even though it is. Does that make sense? It's like you have to suffer, and the person who's got to snatch every day his life out of the fire that's trying to consume him, he might survive it and he might not. But he's going to learn something about himself that no school can teach him, no church can teach him, that he's going to have a resolve about what is and what isn't. And that's what I want to get to that point in my life I'm a kid in the 60s. There's no way I would have thought I would have been an absolutist. You understand? I grew up in the 60s. I grew up in 59. So the whole decade for me was about turmoil and revolution and about change. And I mean, growing up, I had a very, very proactive, Black Power mother. But it's gotten to the point where I'm an absolutist. It's either this way, it's either, in my view, the right way or the wrong way. It's either the humanistic way or the anti-humanistic way. If it doesn't click like that, I don't deal with it.
There's no gray.
No gray. And I used to, man, I've got two daughters that are more Manichaean than me. They look like somebody out of a Melville novel, where you can look and say, oh, that's the bad guy. That's the good guy. Without the hat. I'm talking about the spirit. They're more spiritual than I am as it relates to stuff like that. So that's where I'm coming from. Mine is about humanism. Period. If it doesn't address the human condition and my relationship to my fellow man, it's not. I don't.
It's your turn.
Well, no, Wallace. I mean, a lot of his work is about loneliness and depression, and one of his best stories is called "The Suffering Channel." And again, he predicted back in the 90s that this would exist in the future. And it's a cable channel where people are entertained by watching others at the moment of the greatest torture, I suppose, like when they're being told they have cancer, or when they told their child dies or something, and you see them. Apparently, predicted people would enjoy seeing that sort of thing. So the story is about a man who lives in Illinois, who he's a roto-rooter, and he's not an educated man, but he has a special ability to defecate works of art, like little Oscars,
Okay.
Egyptian goddesses, stuff like that. Well, his wife wonders if maybe they can't make money off that. So the whole question of the story, well, part of the question of the story is, well, why would somebody ever want anybody to know that, and why would you do it? So it's really about celebrity, and the wife wants celebrity, and she wants the money that goes with it. And so she gets a hold of Style magazine to come and do an interview, see if maybe they can get something out of this. So the man comes and he said, well, yeah, because he can hardly believe it either.
I think that is where I'm going to end this on, because I mean.